December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The sky is thick with smoke as explosions rip through the air, sending plumes of fire and debris into the Pacific morning. The sounds of gunfire and screams echo across the water. American sailors and soldiers are scrambling in the chaos as Japanese aircraft continue their relentless assault. But this attack, devastating as it is, marks the beginning of a larger transformation, one that will reshape the course of World War II. As the Japanese bombers retreat, leaving behind a scene of carnage, the United States faces a moment of decision. Pearl Harbor has awakened the industrial giant that is the United States. Though the damage to the Pacific Fleet is severe, the true power of the United States will not be measured in immediate victories or losses at sea, but in the factories that are about to go into overdrive. In the weeks that follow, a massive mobilization effort is set in motion. Shipyards that once produced luxury liners are now retrofitted to build warships, massive aircraft carriers, battleships, and destroyers. The United States has vast resources at its disposal, but more importantly, it has an industrial system unlike any other in the world. The transformation is swift. Within a few months, the country shifts gears from civilian production to a wartime economy. The nation's factories, once dormant or producing consumer goods, now roar with the production of tanks, airplanes, and most crucially, ships. President Franklin D. Roosevelt's arsenal of democracy vision becomes a reality, as the United States' industrial capacity begins to dominate the war effort. At the same time, Germany's Kriegsmarine, once a dominant force in naval warfare under the leadership of Admiral Karl Doenitz, is encountering significant challenges. Despite the successes of the U-boat campaign, the Germans face severe logistical constraints and an inability to rapidly replace losses. Their shipbuilding capacity, which had been impressive early in the war, is now hampered by a lack of raw materials and constant Allied bombing raids on industrial centers. In contrast, American shipyards are expanding rapidly, with new technologies and processes being introduced. The scale of the shipbuilding operation in the United States, combined with the near unlimited supply of resources and manpower, will soon make the difference. This shift is not just a matter of numbers, it's a matter of speed and efficiency. American shipyards can produce more ships in a month than the Germans can produce in a year. By mid-1942, the stage is set. The U.S. Navy, once outnumbered and ill-equipped, begins to swell with new ships, each one a symbol of American industrial might. Meanwhile, the German Kriegsmarine, though still formidable, finds itself falling behind not because of tactical failures, but because of an industrial gap that the United States has exploited to devastating effect. The balance of power on the high seas is about to change. The story of World War II will not just be about battles won or lost. It will be defined by the industrial race that decided the fate of nations. And in this race, the United States is about to prove that its unparalleled capacity for production will be the key to victory. July 10th, 1942, Norfolk, Virginia. The steel hull of the USS Essex gleams in the morning sun as it slips into the water for the first time. The air hums with the sound of grinding metal and the rhythmic pounding of hammers on steel as workers in the massive shipyard race to complete another ship, another warship, to feed the insatiable needs of the American military. The Essex, an aircraft carrier of the newly minted Essex-class, represents more than just a ship. It's a testament to the industrial might of the United States. Where once there were slow-moving civilian industries, now there is an unstoppable tide of war production. This is the reality of 1942, a country in the throes of an industrial revolution unlike any the world has ever seen. Factories that once produced consumer goods now churn out war material at a staggering pace. In shipyards from the East Coast to the West, Americans are building more and more warships, each one faster and more efficiently than the last. It's not just quantity, it's quality too. The Essex-class carriers are superior to anything the Axis powers can field, and they are being produced in record time. What once took years to build is now a matter of months, and the industrial supply lines fueling this machine are growing stronger by the day. By mid-1942, the United States has begun to shift the balance of power in the Atlantic. While the German Kriegsmarine struggles to replace lost ships, the U.S. Navy is steadily increasing in size, with new carriers, battleships, and destroyers rolling off the production lines. The scale of American shipbuilding is unmatched, with the country's factories producing vessels faster than the Axis can sink them. This rapid production doesn't just change the number of ships, it changes the very nature of the naval conflict. The Allies are no longer scrambling for resources, but instead are flooding the seas with an overwhelming tide of new ships. Meanwhile, Germany's naval production struggles under the weight of wartime strain. The Germans, though they have a history of innovation, cannot match the sheer volume of production the United States is capable of. The Kriegsmarine's fleet is aging, with newer vessels taking longer to build and repair due to a lack of materials and labor. Even the famed U-boats, which once held a terrifying sway over Allied shipping, cannot keep pace with the ever-expanding Allied fleets. Their numbers dwindle as Allied anti-submarine tactics improve, and their production slows to a crawl as the German war machine is increasingly stretched thin. The United States industrial machine is also better equipped to innovate. New ship designs, better armor, and improved weaponry are continually rolled out in response to the evolving needs of the war. In contrast, Germany is forced to rely on older designs that are increasingly ineffective against the overwhelming numbers and technological advances of the Allies. The contrast in industrial power becomes undeniable. The United States is producing warships at a rate that no other nation can match, and by the end of 1942, the balance of naval power has shifted in favor of the Allies. German commanders are beginning to recognize the threat posed by the relentless pace of American production, but it is already too late. The war is no longer about individual battles, it's about an industrial race, and the United States is pulling ahead. The consequences of this industrial gap become increasingly clear as the war progresses. The Allies, with their superior production capacity, are able to replace their losses and continue to expand their fleets. Meanwhile, the German Kriegsmarine is forced to fight a losing battle against a superior enemy, unable to match the sheer scale and pace of American shipbuilding. March 28, 1943. Mid-Atlantic. The chill of early spring settles over the vast, empty expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. The USS Yorktown, a formidable aircraft carrier, slices through the waves as it leads its task force into the heart of enemy waters. The crew moves with the practiced rhythm of men who have seen battle, the constant hum of engines, the clatter of gear being checked, the quick, sharp commands, all signs that the United States Navy is now a force to be reckoned with. The Yorktown and her sister ships are part of a new fleet that has risen from the industrial power of the United States, ready to confront the German Kriegsmarine on the high seas. The U-boat threat that once ruled the Atlantic is beginning to lose its grip. In the early years of the war, German submarines, under the command of Admiral Doenitz, had wreaked havoc on Allied merchant and military shipping. Their stealth, their ability to strike quickly and disappear into the depths, made them a formidable enemy. But now, as the number of Allied warships increases and American shipyards churn out new vessels at an astonishing rate, the U-boat threat is beginning to wane. The key to this transformation lies in the development of anti-submarine warfare tactics, which the Allies have rapidly improved upon. Sonar, depth charges, and improved radar systems make it harder for U-boats to operate undetected. Alongside these technological advancements, the overwhelming number of new American ships, carriers, destroyers, and escort vessels are now filling the waters, making it increasingly difficult for German submarines to strike without being hunted down. The Atlantic becomes a battlefield of attrition. The German U-boats, which once dominated the seas, are now constantly under threat. The United States' ability to replace its warships at such a fast pace means that the Allies have an unrelenting presence in the Atlantic. Even as German submarines succeed in sinking Allied vessels, the replacement ships are already being built, leaving the Germans with fewer and fewer opportunities to break through. The turning point comes when the Battle of the Atlantic reaches its peak in mid-1943. Allied warships, supported by the ever-expanding fleet of American carriers and escorts, begin to systematically destroy U-boats at a staggering rate. The once feared German submarine fleet is decimated, with their losses mounting faster than they can be replaced. The U-boats, once a symbol of German naval supremacy, are now being hunted down with increasing effectiveness. The production advantage of the United States is becoming painfully clear to the German High Command. The number of American ships in the Atlantic has grown so large that the Germans no longer have the resources to maintain the kind of offensive pressure they once had. Their U-boats are falling one by one, and the Luftwaffe, which once supported the U-boat campaign, is being stretched thin by Allied air superiority and the relentless bombing raids on German factories. As the United States builds its naval strength, the Germans are left with fewer options. The logistical challenges of maintaining a fleet spread across thousands of miles of ocean begin to take their toll on the Kriegsmarine. The ever-expanding Allied presence on the seas, particularly the overwhelming industrial output of the United States, is making it impossible for Germany to keep up. By the fall of 1943, the U-boat menace is effectively broken. The balance of power in the Atlantic has shifted. Where once the German submarines held the initiative, now it is the Allied ships, led by the growing strength of the United States Navy, that control the seas. This victory, however, is not just about tactics or technology. It is about the overwhelming industrial capacity of the United States. The sheer number of ships produced by American shipyards, coupled with the continuous flow of supplies and materials, has proved to be the decisive factor. The German Navy simply could not replicate this production power, and their inability to replace lost ships with any speed became their undoing. With the U-boat campaign effectively neutralized, the United States Navy and its allies are free to focus on other fronts. The next phase of the war will see these same industrial capabilities turn the tide against the Axis in the Pacific. But for now, the U-boat has been defeated, and the Atlantic is once again secure for Allied shipping. November 4th, 1943, North Atlantic. The gray waves crash against the hull of the USS Bogue as it cuts through the dark waters. On board, the crew is alert, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of a threat. The air is filled with the steady hum of aircraft engines as fighter planes launch from the deck, forming a protective screen over the convoy below. The ship's radar operator suddenly signals a contact, an object moving fast and low to the water's surface. It's a German U-boat. Once, a U-boat like this would have slipped past undetected, its torpedoes a deadly threat to the Allies' shipping lanes. But now, the U-boat is not the predator, it's the prey. As the American escorts close in, the crew of the U-boat knows it stands little chance against the growing numbers of Allied warships. The depth charges, radar-guided and precise, begin their descent, shaking the water with an explosive force. Within moments, the U-boat is doomed, its crew forced to surface only to be quickly overwhelmed by the attacking ships. This encounter is not a rare exception but a reflection of a larger reality. The U-boat campaign, once a dominant force, is rapidly collapsing. The Germans had once used their submarines to devastating effect, sinking merchant ships and military vessels with terrifying efficiency. But by late 1943, the tide had turned. The combination of improved anti-submarine technology, the overwhelming numbers of new American ships, and the relentless pace of Allied shipbuilding had placed the U-boat fleet in an untenable position. The Battle of the Atlantic, which had raged for years, was shifting decisively in favor of the Allies. The Germans, despite their best efforts, could not keep up with the production capabilities of the United States. Each time a U-boat was lost, another American ship, fresh from the factories, appeared to take its place. The Germans, on the other hand, faced increasing difficulties in replenishing their fleet. The U-boat production lines in Germany were slow and vulnerable to Allied bombing raids. The constant loss of U-boats, paired with the inability to replace them at anything near the same rate, spelled disaster for the Kriegsmarine. By late 1943, the Allies had sunk more U-boats than the Germans could produce. The most advanced and deadly submarines in the world were now being systematically hunted and destroyed. The German fleet, once the terror of the Atlantic, was on the brink of annihilation. In addition to the overwhelming numbers of Allied warships, another factor contributing to the collapse of the U-boat campaign was the improvement in Allied tactics. The Germans had relied on the stealth and surprise of their U-boats to strike quickly and then disappear. But as the war progressed, the Allies adapted. Advances in sonar and radar made it increasingly difficult for the U-boats to remain hidden. New tactics, such as the convoy system and the use of long-range bombers, made it more likely that an incoming submarine would be detected before it could strike. The result was a steady attrition of the U-boat force. Where once U-boats had been seen as the perfect weapon for disrupting Allied supply lines, they were now the hunted. The Allies' ability to conduct coordinated attacks, backed by overwhelming production and technological superiority, broke the back of the German submarine fleet. Each U-boat that was sunk represented a dent in the once feared German naval power, but it also represented the larger truth. The Germans simply could not match the industrial output of the United States. The final blow to the U-boat fleet came in 1944, when the last of the major U-boat bases in France fell to Allied forces. As the war in Europe wound down, the U-boats were no longer a significant threat. The industrial might of the United States, which had flooded the Atlantic with warships, had proven too much for the Germans to counter. The U-boat campaign, which had once been a key part of Germany's strategy, was now a shadow of its former self. The U-boat war was over, and the Atlantic was now secure for the Allies. The Germans had failed to match the United States' industrial power, and their once dominant naval force had crumbled under the weight of overwhelming numbers and technological innovation. The collapse of the U-boat campaign marked a turning point in the naval war, and it was a direct result of the unmatched industrial capacity of the United States. The U.S. Navy, now armed with a massive fleet of new warships, was ready to face other threats, most notably in the Pacific, but the defeat of the U-boat menace had cleared the way for Allied victory in the Atlantic. April 12, 1945, Pacific Ocean. The roar of engines fills the air as American aircraft soar overhead, scanning the vast expanse of the Pacific for any sign of enemy forces. Below, the surface of the ocean shimmers under the midday sun, but it is the U.S. Navy that dominates the waters. The carriers, battleships, and destroyers that were built in American shipyards, once thought of as just war machines, have become the backbone of the Allied push to defeat Japan. As the war in the Pacific progresses, the impact of American shipbuilding is unmistakable. The fleet, a testament to the industrial might of the United States, has grown into the largest and most powerful naval force in the world. From the Battle of Midway in 1942 to the island-hopping campaigns of 1944 and 1945, American ships have played a pivotal role in the defeat of the Japanese Empire. Each new wave of American ships that enters the Pacific is another blow to the Imperial Japanese Navy, which cannot match the scale or speed of U.S. production. In many ways, the story of the U.S. Navy in the Pacific is a story of industrial dominance. While the Japanese had early successes, their navy, like the German Kriegsmarine, was ultimately undone by the overwhelming production capacity of the United States. As the U.S. shipyards continued to pump out warships at an unprecedented rate, the Japanese found themselves unable to keep up. Their fleet, once formidable and feared, was now at a disadvantage, unable to replace losses with the same speed and efficiency that the United States could. As the war reaches its final stages, the full scope of American industrial power becomes clear. The United States has not just won battles or achieved victories on the ground, it has reshaped the entire balance of naval power. The sheer number of ships produced by American shipyards has given the Allies an edge that the Axis could never hope to match. The U.S. Navy is now capable of controlling the seas, securing vital supply routes, and projecting power across vast distances. The American shipbuilding effort, once seen as a distant advantage, has proven to be the key to victory in both the Atlantic and the Pacific. By 1945, the Pacific is firmly in Allied hands, and the Imperial Japanese Navy is in full retreat. American warships have not only secured victory, they have rewritten the rules of naval warfare. The ability to produce warships at an industrial scale has not only allowed the United States to replace lost ships, but to overwhelm the enemy with an unstoppable tide of new vessels. The Japanese, with their limited industrial capacity and resources, have been outproduced and outgunned. The legacy of this unparalleled industrial effort is felt long after the war. The United States, now the preeminent naval power in the world, enters the post-war era with the largest and most advanced fleet ever assembled. The shipyards that once produced warships now turn to peacetime industries, but the knowledge, innovation, and techniques developed during the war will continue to shape American naval capabilities for decades to come. For the Germans, the legacy is much different. The Kriegsmarine, once a feared force, is left in ruins. Its U-boat fleet, the cornerstone of its naval strategy, is shattered. The Germans, despite their tactical brilliance, were ultimately undone by the unmatched industrial capacity of the United States. They could not keep up with the scale of American production, and the result was the collapse of their naval ambitions. The story of World War II, and particularly of naval warfare, will always be intertwined with the story of American industrial might. The United States, through its vast network of shipyards, factories, and logistical networks, was able to create a naval force that no enemy could match. The overwhelming output of warships, each one a product of American innovation and manufacturing power, was the decisive factor in securing victory at sea. As the war ends, the world stands witness to the unparalleled impact of American shipbuilding. The U.S. Navy, strengthened by an industrial effort unmatched in history, has not only secured victory in the Atlantic and Pacific, but has changed the nature of naval warfare forever. The Industrial Revolution that began in the factories and shipyards of the United States is now complete. The world will never be the same. August 15th, 1944, Philippine Sea. The roar of engines fills the air as a squadron of American fighters takes off from the deck of the USS Lexington, its hull gleaming in the Pacific sun. Below, the vast ocean stretches endlessly, and the weight of the conflict seems almost too much to comprehend. The once powerful Imperial Japanese Navy, which had enjoyed a string of successes early in the war, now finds itself on the defensive. The United States Navy, empowered by its unparalleled industrial capacity, has turned the tide of the Pacific War. What was once a fight for survival has become a relentless offensive. The American fleet, now massive and formidable, is a direct result of the incredible production effort that has poured out of U.S. shipyards since the war began. Aircraft carriers, destroyers, battleships, and submarines, all born from the same factories that built tanks and airplanes, are now the backbone of the Allied war effort in the Pacific. The Japanese, unable to match the scale of American shipbuilding, find themselves losing ship after ship, their naval assets unable to keep up with the overwhelming force the United States can deploy. The Battle of the Philippine Sea is a key turning point in this war of attrition. The battle itself, fought between June 19th and June 20th, 1944, sees the United States gain complete dominance in the skies and seas. The Japanese, facing a far superior number of American ships and aircraft, suffered devastating losses. This was not simply a victory of tactics, but of sheer industrial output. The U.S. Navy's rapid buildup of carrier-based aircraft and its ability to replace losses faster than the Japanese could even begin to recover made the difference. By the time the battle ends, the Japanese are left with a shattered carrier force and a fleet that no longer has the strength to challenge the United States in the Pacific. Throughout the battle, American airstrikes relentlessly hammer Japanese aircraft carriers, sinking 4 and crippling many more. These losses are a staggering blow to the Japanese fleet, which had once been a highly effective fighting force. Now, after years of war, they are outnumbered and outclassed. The American carriers, armed with the latest in aviation technology and a never-ending stream of aircraft from the U.S. shipyards, are proving to be the decisive force in this naval struggle. As the battle rages on, the overwhelming production power of the United States becomes clear. The constant supply of new ships, aircraft, and reinforcements allows the Americans to push forward relentlessly, while the Japanese, struggling to replenish their losses, can no longer keep up. The United States' ability to outproduce and outsupply the enemy gives it the strategic advantage in every theater of combat. By the time the battle concludes, the U.S. Navy is poised to take the initiative across the entire Pacific. The Japanese, despite their tenacity and their initial successes, find themselves unable to stop the tide of American warships and aircraft. The relentless pace of U.S. industrial production, combined with the technological advantages gained from years of innovation, has overwhelmed the Japanese Navy. The Philippines, a crucial strategic point in the Pacific, is now within reach of the Allied forces. The naval dominance the United States has achieved ensures that the Japanese will never again be able to mount an effective counterattack. The war in the Pacific is far from over, but the battle for control of the seas has been won, and the key to that victory is clear: the unmatched industrial capacity of the United States, which has fueled every victory and sustained every effort. As American forces advance across the Pacific, the scale of U.S. shipbuilding continues to increase. New battleships, carriers, and submarines pour out of the shipyards, while older vessels, long since worn by the brutal demands of war, are replaced at an astonishing rate. The Japanese, with their shrinking fleet and faltering industrial base, are left with few options. The balance of naval power in the Pacific has irrevocably shifted. The industrial advantage that the United States enjoys is the key factor that will ultimately lead to victory over Japan. No longer fighting with a fleet of equal size or capabilities, the Japanese Navy is fighting a war of attrition it cannot win. The United States' ability to keep its fleet fresh, its aircraft numerous, and its forces supplied at a continuous rate leaves the Japanese with nothing but the knowledge that they are outgunned, outproduced, and on the brink of defeat. As the war in the Pacific continues to unfold, one thing remains clear. The American industrial effort, from its shipyards to its factories, has been the decisive force in securing victory. September 2nd, 1945, Tokyo Bay, Japan. The sun sets over the Pacific as the Japanese delegation steps aboard the USS Missouri, the massive battleship that has become a symbol of Allied naval supremacy. The air is still, the sound of war replaced by the sharp clicks of military boots on the deck. On this day, Japan formally surrenders, bringing an end to the most destructive conflict the world has ever known. In the wake of the Japanese surrender, the full extent of American industrial power and its role in securing victory becomes unmistakably clear. The war, which had raged across oceans and continents, was not just a battle of armies and tactics, it was a contest of industrial might. While the Allies relied on their manufacturing capabilities to supply the war, it was the United States' unparalleled ability to build and innovate that ultimately tipped the scales. By 1945, the United States had produced more warships, aircraft, and armaments than all the Axis powers combined. The sheer volume of American military production had overwhelmed the Axis, whose industrial capacities were continually outstripped by the relentless output of the U.S. war machine. As the Japanese Navy, once a formidable force, lies broken in the wake of Allied victory, the Pacific is now entirely in the hands of the United States. The aircraft carriers, battleships, and destroyers that had flooded the Pacific theater played a critical role in securing this victory. They were the products of a war effort that saw American shipyards and factories churning out war material at an unprecedented rate. Every ship that sailed, every aircraft that soared, and every piece of military equipment that was deployed on the battlefield was part of a broader story of industrial dominance. For the Japanese, the legacy is one of lost potential. Once a naval power that had planned to dominate the Pacific, Japan now faced the consequences of a broken industrial base. While the United States continually ramped up its production, Japan struggled with resource shortages, a lack of effective infrastructure, and mounting losses. The Japanese Navy could not replicate the speed or scale of American manufacturing, and their inability to replace lost ships, aircraft, and resources sealed their fate. The Japanese fleet, despite its bravery and technological innovations, was no match for the industrial juggernaut of the United States. In the post-war world, the legacy of American shipbuilding would extend far beyond the defeat of the Axis powers. The United States, now the undisputed leader of the free world, entered the post-war era with the most advanced and powerful military fleet in existence. The innovations born from wartime production would shape American military doctrine for decades to come, and the technological advancements made during the war would fuel future developments in both military and civilian sectors. The American shipyards that had once produced weapons of war began to shift back to peacetime production, but the impact of their work during the war could not be overstated. The lessons learned in mass production, resource management, and logistical coordination would serve as the foundation for the United States' post-war economic boom. The industrial power that had defeated two of the most formidable military forces in the world would now drive the economic recovery and growth of the United States, as well as its rise as a global superpower. For the Axis powers, the legacy is one of industrial failure. The Germans, once feared for their technological innovations, could not compete with the vast resources and manufacturing capabilities of the United States. Their military forces, once the pinnacle of engineering and design, were left decimated by the relentless production output of the Allies. The German Kriegsmarine, once a dominant force, was now shattered, its U-boats and battleships sunk or abandoned. The industrial strategies that had worked so well in the early stages of the war were no match for the overwhelming industrial force that the United States had brought to bear. As the world reflects on the lessons of World War II, it is clear that industrial capacity played a pivotal role in the outcome of the war. The United States, with its unparalleled ability to produce war material, not only defeated the Axis powers, but also reshaped the global balance of power. The speed and scale of U.S. production enabled by its vast network of factories, shipyards, and technological innovations were the decisive factors in winning the war. The legacy of American shipbuilding and industrial power is one of resilience, innovation, and unmatched capability. It was the key to victory in the Atlantic and the Pacific, and it ensured that the United States would emerge from the war as the preeminent global power. The shipyards and factories that had once been focused on producing consumer goods were now the engines of victory, and their contribution to the war effort would forever change the course of history.